Hi, everybody. So today we are going to talk about navigating the CAST. That's the California Science Test. This is the 2021-2022 edition. In this video, we're going to talk about the purpose of the California Science Test, the design of the test, the role that performance tasks play in this assessment, and some tools that you can use in your classroom to prepare your students to take the California Science Test. I wanted to start out today with what is the CAST? The California Science Test assesses the progression of student learning against the California Next Generation Science Standards. It incorporates 3 dimensions of Next Generation Science Standards learning and teaching. It incorporates the disciplinary core ideas, the science and engineering practices, and the cross-cutting concepts. The questions are phenomenon-based, which means they are going to be focused on real-world experiences. And the questions assess students' ability to interpret and represent information in a variety of modalities. They're going to include analyzing images, they're going to include analyzing models, include analyzing data, and reading. The estimated time to complete the CAST is about 2 hours, although I do know from reports back that it does take students significantly longer. So make sure that when the test is planned for in your classroom, that you've given yourself some extra time. The students do have as much time as they need to complete the assessment. It is a computer-based assessment that's given in the 5th grade, the 8th grade, and then once again in high school. And it's comprised of discrete question items and performance tasks. Each assessment item measures 2 out of 3 of the dimensions of the 3-dimensional learning. Your discrete questions are going to be simple, one and done questions that do not require the connection to other questions that have been asked. Performance tasks are a series of 4 to 7 questions that the students will be asked around the same phenomenon. And they'll be asked to use the information from one question to assist them in answering some of the others. At the end of this, families are provided with individual student score reports, and the local educational agencies receive the summary of their results, as well as county results and state results. These results usually come back early fall, usually by the end of September, but I don't have a specific date yet as to when they will be released for this year. We'll have more information on that as the testing season approaches. So one of the questions I get asked all the time about the CAST, how do I pack 3 years of science into one? And the honest answer is you don't. There's no way to take 3 years of comprehensive science instruction, hands-on quality instruction, and pack it into 1 year in the classroom. So the response that I usually give is, don't try to pack 3 years in, just try to teach well. Work with the students on the 3 dimensions. Focus on the disciplinary core ideas for your grade level, but really hit those cross-cutting concepts and those science and engineering practices hard. Really integrate those not only into science instruction, but when you're doing language arts instruction, when you're doing math instruction, those 2 pieces, you can actually fold into a lot of different areas of the work that you're doing in other subjects as well. So let's talk about the test. So it's used to inform program level and school improvement planning. And we assess the students to see how well they're getting that information throughout the year so that we can plan for future years of instruction. And it will provide information to the students, but it's more information for us to evaluate the way that we're teaching the science and how we can improve in areas of rigor and areas of concept development. The organization of the CAST is 6 segments. Those 6 segments are broken up into 1 and 2, which are discrete items. Segment 3, which some students will receive discrete items and some students will receive a performance task. And segments 4, 5, and 6, in which students will receive a performance task for each. Now, the suggested break times come before segment 3 or after segment 3 so that you are not interrupting any students while they are taking that performance task. Once a student starts a performance task, we really need to give them as much time as we can, as much time as they need to finish that entire performance task. And so that's why the suggested break times, if you have to break it up over multiple days or you have to take a break because the students need to go to recess or lunch, we suggest that you take those breaks either before segment 3, that's before they're getting into any performance tasks, or after segment 3, because then all students will be working on performance tasks after segment 3. Let's talk a little bit about segment 3 here, discrete items or performance task. Those are the field test questions. So those questions won't actually be counting towards the student scores on their assessment. These are the questions where they're trying to field test the questions to see if they are going to be used on future CAST assessments. So any items that the students see in there, they're either going to get a set of 12 to 13 discrete items, or they're going to get one performance task. They will not receive both in segment 3. So you'll walk around your room during that time and you'll see some students are working on independent items and some students are working on a full performance task. So again, those are field test questions and they don't count towards their assessment scores, but they do provide information and feedback for the test makers as to whether they have good questions and whether the questions will be good for use on future exams. So the next piece of what I took is I kind of took in some information from the California Science Test Revised Blueprint. And this is really telling how many items a student might encounter in segment A. Now, segment A are discrete items. So how many items might a student encounter in physical sciences in 5th grade, in 8th grade, and in high school? And then here are the performance tasks that they might find in segment B. So that's that 4, 5, and 6 segment, how many items they might find in that section based on a physical sciences. So that's kind of what you're looking at here. There's 1 to 3 questions on physical sciences 1, which is matter and interactions. There's 1 to 5 in 8th grade. And then in high school, they're definitely going to get 2, but they could get as many as 7. So you can kind of see how this works out. Every student will receive between 8 and 9 questions from this group on their assessment. All students will receive between 8 and 10 from this group on their 8th grade assessment, and so on. So you can kind of see how that breakdown happens. So the students will receive in 5th grade a total of 26 discrete items, which are worth anywhere between 28 and 32 points. And in 8th grade, they received 28 discrete items, which were anywhere between 30 and 34 points on this scaled score. So this kind of is kind of the breakdown for how things are laid out on the assessment. So I took this piece, and here's for segment C. This is the section where they either get discrete items or they get a performance task. And you can see how that's broken down. They're getting 6 field test discrete items and possibly 6 field test performance task items that are available. So, and here's the link to that blueprint, like I was telling you before. What I did was I took more information from that blueprint. There are a couple other documents in that blueprint that are really helpful for analyzing, but a little bit difficult to read. So I took that information, I put it together with the items that are most frequently tested, the ones that had that higher number of possible questions. And I came up with this table of standards that you could prioritize. So there's not a priority standards list for science at the state level, but I kind of took the data together and made some priority standards that might help you in making decisions about the instruction that you're doing for the rest of this year and possibly as we move forward with the CAST assessment. So for instance, this idea of physical science 2, motion and stability, forces and interactions, often is assessed with the cross-cutting concept of patterns and cause and effect. So if I'm teaching motion and stability, I might focus my lens on patterns and cause and effect. And oftentimes it is assessed with the idea of asking questions and defining problems, or planning and carrying out investigations, or engaging in an argument from evidence. So when I'm studying physical science 2, which is motion and stability or forces and interactions, I'm going to do these, and I'm going to think about it this way. As we move through science, it gets more complex. So we're always building on those prior ideas. And from 5th grade to 8th grade, we've moved up 3 years of building those concepts. And so that's what we're going to be looking at on the 8th grade assessment. So if any of these fall into the areas of science that you're working on in 8th grade, then you know how to look at them, what lens to use, and then maybe what activities to participate in or have your students participate in around these concepts. And I wanted to talk a little bit about the test format. Again, I talked earlier a little bit about the discrete items and the performance tasks, but you think about discrete items as standalone items. They're machine scoreable, which means multiple choice or drag and drop. You might have a graph that you have to fill in, but it is machine scoreable. It's not going to require human eyes to interpret it or human brains to interpret it. The scope and depth of the measurement is the discrete items are measuring the wide breadth. So they are like trying to pull in all the concepts that should be covered. These are going to be like your one and done, just quick answers, get it done, move on to the next one. You'll see here the performance expectations for grade 5. You're going to have 3rd through 5th grade PEs are going to be assessed, and occasionally some of the foundational skills that are introduced in kindergarten through grade 2. That's why it's so important to not try to cover all the science, because when we try to cover all the science, we lose the hands-on activities, we lose the experiences, and we lose the richness that's actually going to help our students to perform better on this assessment. Because this assessment is not just about the concepts, it's about the doing of the science. It's about the thinking about the science. So if we can teach our students to think and do science, we are going to score much better on even the discrete items that are content-based. So the performance tasks, that's the not discrete items. There are 2 to 3 performance tasks that students will encounter. They are anywhere between 4 and 7 items each. So again, those are questions that are building upon one another. So we have to teach our students how to take information from one question, from the answer that we have for this question, and build on it for the next question. This is where we're getting the depth from. This is where the depth is measured. The students will be asked to look at information in multiple ways throughout that task. They might look at graphs, they might look at activities, they might look at observational data, they might have to make observations themselves, and that is built into this performance task to make it a rich experience. So make sure that with your students, you're giving them the opportunity to have these rich experiences in class and have to look at information from multiple sources before they're writing about it, because that will help them with these performance tasks. So it is a deep measurement of targeted sample of just a few PEs, so performance expectations, and they're provided in item sets. Again, you'll see grade 5, you're going to be tested on grade 3 through 5, plus foundational concepts. They're going to be looking for those. And 8th grade, you'll be tested on 6th through 8th grade PEs, performance expectations. There are some tools available to teachers and students to practice or get to know a little bit more about how the questions are measured, and also tools that you might be able to use while you're taking the assessment. So what I have on this slide are practice test constructed response annotated examples. So oftentimes, as test administrators, we will use these types of questions and these types of documents to analyze how to help our students, but it's also powerful to use these with the students. You could take this prompt. So this is a practice test item. It's item number 16 that the students, if they're taking the practice test, would actually encounter. You could have them answer prompt 16 on their own and then give them the rubric. Let them look at the exemplars of what they could have written and then see where they would score, whether they would have given themselves a 2. Here are all kinds of exemplars and rationale for the 0.2. Here's the 1 point. Again, they could see if they matched up with what these students were writing. So this could be a tool that you could use with students to help them improve their writing before they get to the cast. So have them do that practice test and then have them evaluate their answers using the rubric. You don't have to do it all in one shot either. This could be like a morning warm-up if you wanted to. Have them answer a question, one of the questions from the practice test, and then have them look over their work and give themselves a score. So I have that for 5th grade and 8th grade. I also have the Desmos calculator link. It's a little bit different between the 5th grade and the 8th grade. They have the different, 8th grade, I believe, has the scientific calculator available to them. 5th grade has a more simple calculator. And then, of course, the link to the practice test portal. Super important that you give the kids the chance to see what the test questions look like, because we don't want the computer test to get in the way or the way that the question is asked to get in the way of the student performing well. So please give them an opportunity to get in there, dig around, look at the questions, ask questions about how the question is asked, ask questions about how to answer the question, because sometimes it comes down to just the way that I type in an answer, or I can't figure out the format for the answer, so I'm just going to skip it. So make sure that the students aren't feeling that frustration when they take the test for real by taking this practice test that will help them to prepare for that. There are both practice and training tests available for science, just as well as there are for math and ELA, for those of you who are familiar with giving the math and ELA assessments. As I mentioned before, every question on the assessment will measure 2 out of 3 of the 3 dimensions. So one of the ways that you can help the students be successful is to identify what they're being asked to answer. So really looking at the question and analyzing, am I being asked about the cross-cutting concepts? Am I being asked about how I do the science? Or am I being asked about the content? And figuring out which of the 3 they're actually being asked about. Most of the time, the DCI, or the disciplinary core idea, is going to be the focus of the question. And then either the cross-cutting concept or the SEP, the science and engineering practice, is going to be the second dimension that's introduced. It's very rarely that you're going to have the science and engineering practice and the cross-cutting concept without a disciplinary core idea. So preparing students for this, I did put some tools on here, again, that I thought you could use. If your students need some graph practice, a fun way to do it is the New York Times, what's going on in this graph. Note, this is definitely something that you need to check before you share it with the kids. I would not be like, hey, just go to New York Times, what's going on with this graph section? Because it is published in the newspaper, and the intent of it is to help society at large be better at data analysis and analyzing graphs. So sometimes the graph is not always appropriate for students. So definitely take a look at that before you introduce it to them. But I just thought it was a unique way to look at that. I believe it's published every week, so you can kind of take a look each week and see, is it appropriate this week and can we use it? Obviously, the practice tests, I really highly suggest that you use those. And then I've also included in here the constructed response annotated examples, again, just so you have another place to get to them. But I wanted to point out something in preparing for future CAST success. This may not be feasible for this year, but thinking about the future and thinking about next year and planning for next year, you might tap into the Inspiring CAST Success Guide in your Inspire Science text. So let me pull that up for you. So I'm going to pull up the 5th grade example for you in my 5th grade demo class, and it's right here in the additional resources section. I'll show middle school. Middle school has a little bit different, no, maybe it's the same. But it's right here in the additional resources section, Inspiring CAST Success Guide, grade 5. You'll see that it has the teacher support scoring rubrics, student support with guided practice, and then performance task practice. So this could be your go-to guide for those performance task practice items. It's broken down by unit, and then it will tell the module that you have, and there's a unit test included in here. The unit test includes questions that are similar to what they're going to see in the performance tasks. Now their questions are not, they try to base it as close to the CAST as they could. They try to give you 3-dimension assessment practice, CAST item type practice, but again, this is not digital. This is paper, so it will be a little bit different when it comes to the performance of the task. So you'll see here, module 1 matter, you'll see here's the question, and then there's a 3-dimensional coach here on the side. So this actually coaches the students through how to think about the question that they're reading. So you'll see in this one, 2 students are discussing matter. 1 student claims that air is matter, another student disagrees. So first I could identify, if I was being trained on how to look at these questions, I would be like, okay, air is matter. That is my concept. And then I could look at this question and see which model best illustrates. So this is looking at the dimension of science and engineering practice. So now I'm going to look at these through the lens of a science and engineering practice. How do I do the science to figure out the answer? So what could I do to figure out whether or not air is matter? That's how I would analyze this question. You can do this with your students throughout the year. So thinking forward, using this tool as a guide for how to help students to really analyze the questions will be helpful in your teaching practice. All right, so you do have those for 5th grade. Let me show you. Let me go back to my programs. If I pop into 8th grade, you'll see that is also here in this, almost the same place. It's next to your program guide, Inspiring CAST Success Guide, grade 8. So same, they have the same types of questions. They have the same guide on the side for the students to help prepare them for the CAST assessment. So I hope that this has been helpful in getting you a little bit better prepared for preparing your students for that CAST assessment. If you have any questions, please feel free to reach out. My email address, Mary Elizabeth Kwan at omsd.net. I am happy to help you as much as I can. And if I don't know the answer to the question, I will try to hunt it down for you. So thank you so much for watching, and see you next time. Thanks for watching this episode of the Curriculum Cafe. Click like and subscribe to join the cafe for more classroom tips from the TOA team.